When it comes to television commercials, hate messaging is statistically more effective than hope messaging. Or at least that's what comes out of analyzing over 10 million television commercials and video assets for what drives engagement and downstream ROI. Let me show you what I mean. So when we look at television commercials and video assets that have hope messaging in them, we see that on an A to F scale, the downstream response that we get is a grade of D, not great, below average. Versus if we were to swap the hope messaging for television commercials and video assets that have hate messaging, we see that their downstream responsiveness is a grade of B, and statistically significantly better, more performant than the hope messaging. This was something I wasn't prepared for when I started Videoquant. So I come from the world of managing television data science teams where we're optimizing hundreds of millions of dollars per year in television commercials across the globe. But every one of those commercials were positive. In fact, when I started Videoquant, one of the first things I did is I started analyzing all the TV commercials across the big brands in the US. And what we find is that in terms of a 0 to 1 scale of sentiment, so 1 being super positive messaging, 0 being super negative, the average for big US brands is a 0.999998. So almost all positive messaging. And that's the world I came from. I was insulated from all the other types of messaging that's out there. And when you look at the entire spectrum of television commercials and video assets that's out there, what you're going to find is that hate messaging is more effective. Now, I haven't specified what industry we're looking at here, so we're looking across sectors, but as we drill down into specific business types and industries and categories, it's the same exact find. Hate messaging is more effective than hope messaging. And so I've wondered, is there a way to short circuit that? Can we develop a television commercial that uses hope messaging in a way that can counteract, that could perform at parity or statistically better than hate messaging? Turns out to be difficult to do, but it isn't impossible. And let me show you what I mean. So first, let's choose an industry, and perhaps there's no better sector to try this out in than in political advertising, given 2024 elections are coming up. So first, let's get a baseline for video assets in the election industry, the space. And we see on average, election television commercials, video assets don't perform all that great. It gets a score of D in terms of downstream return on ad spend and engagement. We also have what's called the VQ score. This is just a numeric value for that grade on a scale from 0 to 1, 1 meaning a super viral, high-performing piece of video and television content, 0 meaning crickets. This industry as a whole, all the assets get a 0.44. Now, let's start playing with different types of messaging, and let's keep notes of what we're finding here. So elections, we got a score of 0.44. All right, so let's start out with the hope messaging. So election television commercials and video content that has hope in them. So we see that this gets a score of 0.37, and we'll also keep track of the confidence bands. So let's do hope, 0.37. Confidence bands are 0.33 to 0.41. So one of the first things you should note is that hopeful messaging in the context of elections statistically underperforms the majority of the average for that industry. So it's not great. Let's now try hate messaging. So election. So this is television commercials, video assets related to elections that include hate. We see already the score has gone up. So we went from a D to a C minus, and we see that the value here is 0.46. With the confidence band, 90% confidence band, 0.42 to 0.5. So let's just keep track of that. Hate is 0.46. Confidence band, 0.42 to 5. We already see statistically significant difference in the performance between these two concepts in the context of elections. Let's try a couple of other permutations of this. Let's try love, just for fun. Score of D, so it's a 3.3. Let's just put this down. Love, 0.33, 0.28 to 0.38. And let's try one last one. Let's try fear. Fear gets a D, and it's a 0.43. Confidence span of 0.39 to 0.47. All right, so what do we see here? We see already that hope and love are very similar. So love here, 0.33, is within the confidence span. It's the lower end of the confidence span with hope. So hope is better than love, but it's still within the noise. But clearly we see that hate messaging and fear messaging are very similar to each other, and they both outperform hope and love messaging in the election, television, and video asset realm. In order to kind of corroborate these results, one of the things that I do in the tool, in my own tool, is I switch out what we're using for the setting the context. So instead of election, let's try something else that will indicate where we're talking about TV commercials and video assets in the political realm. So let's do campaign candidates. And let's keep with this fearful messaging, and let's keep track of the numbers here. So it's a 0.37. Make a note here. Fear, 0.37, and this is for campaign candidates. And the confidence span is 0.33 to 0.41. Oh, we won't keep track of the confidence span for this one. It's we'll keep going. All right, so let's now do love. So love gets a 0.32. So we see that fear beats love already. Let's try hate. When we put hate in the TV commercial video asset, it goes right up. So 0.46. Look what a difference. Look what a difference. All right, and then the last one is hope. .32. So we see corroborating evidence here. It's the same pattern. It's the hope and love score similarly. Hate and fear both do better. Hate beats out fear. This time it's a larger breakout between hate and fear. But in both cases, political advertising, television advertising, video asset advertising that is related to hate is statistically more effective at driving downstream performance and ROI than hope and love messaging. So one of the questions that I've asked is there a way that we can find a way to make hopeful messaging more effective, to get it to parity, if not statistically better than hate messaging? So let me show you how I approach that. So what I do is I'll generally start off just typing in what is the sentiment that I'm interested in optimizing. And I'm not going to specify any particular industry because I want to look across industries. I want to get concepts that have been tested across industries in the television video asset realm. And let's just see what has worked better. So we see hope in general doesn't work all that great as a concept, but we can now look at the suggestions for what the algorithm predicts and finds and identifies as being statistically better than where we're at right now. And this is an interesting one. Look at the first one here. I thought all hope was lost until. Very interesting. So it gets a score of B. Now let's make a slight change. Let's bring this into the realm of elections. Let's see what the algorithm believes will happen if we were to take this hopeful messaging that it finds effective on average across industries, and let's bring it into the election realm. And I'm going to get rid of these three dots over here. And let's click submit. And boom, we see that it predicts this is effective. This is an effective hopeful message in the election realm. And we see that it gets a score of 0.58. Let me write that down. I'll call this hope plus. So hope plus equals 0.58, and the confidence band is 0.54 to 0.56. What? Sorry. 0.62. My apologies. 62. Look at that. Look at that. We have found or identified a possible candidate of messaging around hope that will statistically beat the hate messaging. And when you, when you think about it, one of the interesting things, like as you're looking at the messaging, is it almost has this kind of flair of negativity to it. I thought all hope was lost until. So it's almost like you have to frame hope in the context of a moment of maximum despair in order to make it effective. So it's the framing of the hope messaging that can make it effective. So I want to leave off, like we could keep going here, but I think it kind of shows how there is potential. But I want to leave off by sharing some thoughts. So I'm going to be watching the political television commercials that come out for 2024. And I'm expecting to see plenty of hate messaging because, as we saw in the data here, if you're not doing any sophisticated types of analysis around television video strategy, and you're using just basic, surveys, focus groups, panels, what you're going to find is that hate messaging it looks effective. And so, for every dollar you invest, if you have very little insight of what's happening and what drives television and video engagement and ROI, you're going to choose hate messaging. It's the safer thing to do. In fact, when you look at the election average, notice how the election average and hate are similar. And that's because the majority of election messaging is negative. The industry has already figured out that the hate messaging is effective across billions of dollars of advertising and television commercials. So that's the reason why we see that. But I'm hopeful that there's going to be some hope messages that work. I'm expecting that there's going to be plenty of hope messages that fall into the traps that we showed here. Folks are just throwing cash away, and when they're trying hope, just using very simple hope messaging. Turns out you need a lot of discipline to get the hope messaging to work. But I'm hopeful that there will be a campaign out there that can make it effective. And I hope that they're going to win with that message. It certainly is going to drive the return on ad spend if they're disciplined about how they're talking about hope and they actually use it at scale. So I hope you found this interesting. It's an area that really excites me. I wish I could be spending more time on this. But until next time, take care. I'm the founder of Videoquant, Tim Doria.